Turf Today, Rollin' with the Green Section, is recorded on the Superintendent Network. Since 1920, the USGA Green Section has been developing sustainable management practices that produce better playing conditions for better golf. And they achieve this mission through four main programs: research, course consulting service, education and outreach, and championship agronomy. To learn more and sign up for the Green Section, head to usga.org and look under Advancing for all of the great stuff that the Green Section record can provide you. Today on the show, we have George Waters, who is the Senior Manager with USGA Green Section Education. Also on the show today is agronomist from the USGA, Elliott Dowling, who talks about his article, which is titled, Consider the Potential of Less Aggressive Aeration. It's a pleasure to be along with you guys through this ride. A lot of education coming through here and hopefully some great conversations that are started because of it. You all know me, Adam Kershane from Turf Today. I'm also joined by my normal co-host, Brian Laurent. Sit back, enjoy this episode. We have more coming throughout the year. It's a great way for people to learn and pass some information around. The Green Section's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of great articles available. So make sure you consider some of them when you're looking for some information or some new ideas on things to do on the golf course.
My name is George Waters. I lead the Education and Outreach Department of the USGA Green Section. I've been with the USGA for about 9 years now, a little over 9 years now. I came here via the world of golf course design and construction, was where I spent most of my career prior to coming to the USGA. But in my interest in golf course design and construction, starting from very early on, I found that one of the best ways for me to get a chance to spend time on courses, really understand design, but also understand that balance between architecture and course maintenance. And you need both, obviously, for a design to be successful. I found that working on maintenance teams was a great way to just get my foot in the door in the business, get a chance to meet some people, get a chance to study some really cool courses. It was a great way to get around to neighborhoods where there was a lot of interesting architecture that I wanted to learn about. So I started working at a place called St. George's on Long Island, just 10 minutes from my house. Really just random luck that it happened to be a really cool old Devereux Emmett golf course. It was the first golf course that I really spent a lot of time on that wasn't sort of a par 3 course. And I was really fortunate that, number one, we had a great superintendent who was really interested in sort of teaching me things and taking me under his wing and teaching me a lot about design and maintenance and about the course and the different things we were doing. That was all really great. Another really cool thing is a very unusual design, good classic course with some really funky features and interesting greens. And because I hadn't seen a lot, I kind of took all that for granted that, like, oh, golf courses are all like this. Like, sure, you can have a trench bunker all the way around the one green with no easy way to get in and out. Like, yeah, it's fine. Like humps in the middle of these greens. So I really had a very open mind coming into golf course architecture because a lot of the stuff that I saw early on was kind of unusual, but I took it for granted. And from there, as I went through my undergrad, I got into golf course design by reading Tom Doak's books. And this was sort of before he was, famous Tom Doak, but he was famous enough that he was writing. And so I used to just call his office every summer and ask, and I think the office was just in his basement at the time. So like he would answer the phone, or one of the other guys would answer the phone and say, hey, I'm interested in becoming a golf course architect. I have some experience in maintenance. What should I do this summer? And he said one summer, well, you got to go to Scotland and learn about links golf. That's really the foundation of all. So I emailed every course in Scotland that was sort of highly rated in the confidential guide. The only one that got back to me was Royal Dornoch, which was a lucky break. And I said, hey, I've got maintenance experience. And they said, well, you can come work on the maintenance staff here for a summer. We can't really pay you, but we'll put you up in the course manager's house. You can play as much golf as you want, and you can caddy for extra spending money. So I was off to Dornoch as a 21-year-old kid to go work on the maintenance staff, had never seen a links golf course before, and kind of just got immersed in it and just spent day after day out there. And we'd work on the course from 5 o'clock in the morning till 1:30 in the afternoon or something, all sunlight up there in Scotland that time of year. I'd go home, have dinner, clean up, ride back to the course, tee off at 7 o'clock, and have Royal Dornoch all to myself, night after night, just me on the links, few people walking their dogs, a couple people playing golf. So a pretty great way to get immersed in, classic architecture, the sort of foundations of golf course architecture, but also to see a very different kind of maintenance. Not that the course took care of itself, but it was a lot different than private country club in the Northeast, where you have much tougher environment for growing grasses in a lot of ways, different patterns of play, carts. I mean, we didn't really have any of that to deal with at Royal Dornoch. We kind of took the weather as it came. The grasses were happy there. They'd been growing there for a long time. So again, it's not like we didn't have to take care of the course, but it was a much more hands-off kind of maintenance and kind of taking it as it came, more so than what could be more of a intensive care kind of operation at a Northeastern country club. After Dornoch, interned with Tom Doak for a summer, and then worked at Marion for a summer on their maintenance staff. And again, I just kind of emailed every course in the area and said, hey, I'd love to come. There's so much great golf in Philadelphia. I'd love to learn more about it. Got lucky again that the only place that got back to me was Marion, and they said, yeah, we can have you, fine, come along. You're going to work hard, but you'll see some cool stuff. And that was a great contrast to experiencing a place like Dornoch, which is sort of on the one end of maintenance intensity, and sort of to then go to Marion, which was at the time we were a year before having the US Amateur. And, it's a much more intensive operation there. I mean, number one, you've got these, super high expectations for what you're delivering playability wise, but also any of you that have been to Philadelphia, like, it's not exactly a hospitable environment for growing cool season grasses. The grasses are not just taking care of themselves there. And it's not a matter of just kind of letting nature take its course. So it was a lot of work. It was a bigger operation. We had way more staff. We had more equipment. We were doing projects all over the place. And then also really dialing in the details on everything from hand watering to weed control to, just everything. So it was great to sort of see that whole spectrum in the maintenance world. And then I was lucky, a few times later on, one of the best maintenance opportunities I got was I worked on the restoration at California Golf Club in San Francisco for Kyle Phillips. And then as I was continuing to work on projects kind of around the world at that time, I would have breaks a couple months in between, and I would be back in San Francisco just sort of hanging out. And Thomas Bastis, who was the superintendent at Cal Club at the time, now at the PGA Tour Agronomy, messaged me one time, and he's like, look, if you're home and you're kind of doing stuff, like, you're not doing anything, like, why don't you just come down to Cal Club and help us out? We got 100 projects to do. This was when the course was relatively, freshly established, newly grown in. There was just a lot of little things to fix up all the time. So I did that for a few times in between projects, had some longer stints, kind of worked with them, almost as an assistant, second assistant, whatever you want to call it, but ran their irrigation operation. I learned a lot about running irrigation, learned a lot about golf course water use, being in an environment where we were growing fine fescue, predominantly fine fescue fairways, fine fescue bent fairways, fine fescue roughs, bent grass greens, trying to keep those greens free of poa annua, working in a climate where we didn't get rain from April till October, really, like not a drop. It was cool, but it was not easy, from a watering standpoint. So it was a lot of fun and a really interesting challenge to kind of manage water in that environment. And I got the really good lesson of seeing a bunch of design features that I personally shaped or created, and seeing what a pain they were to maintain, and seeing some of the ones that we had to fix after the fact. And, ones that I can remember having argued with Thomas about during the construction, where he's like, we're never going to be able to keep sand on these bunkers. And they worked out fine. And then there were other spots where I had argued with somebody and I was wrong and got to go back and fix it myself, which I think is the best way to really get a chance to kind of learn that interplay between maintenance and construction. And then I was working on a golf course restoration project in New Jersey at Watchung Valley Golf Club, which is about 10 minutes from USGA headquarters. I had met some people that worked in the green section over the years, Dave Otis at Sabonic, and just a number, Pat Gross in California. And, I'd gotten to know some people over the years, and then happened to get to know some folks while I was working at Watchung Valley and just in the neighborhood. This opportunity came up in the education and outreach department. I had written a lot. I had gotten into golf course architecture and the golf industry really by way of reading books, reading articles. I had written a bunch of articles. I wrote a book about golf courses on sandy ground. And so I was always interested in writing, photography, specifically in that sort of golf course architecture, construction, maintenance realm. and a job in the education department of the Green Section came up. I applied for it. I don't think I heard from them for months. My HR department's probably going to get upset at me for mentioning it. But like, it was like a long time, like to the point that I was like, I can't believe I didn't even get a call back. But they did eventually call back. I was in London at the time, actually, and got a call. I was working on a project and got a message and came back, and things kind of fell into place. That was about 9 years ago. And now we worked in, I was based in USGA headquarters in New Jersey for a long time. And now just the past couple of years, been down here in Pinehurst at our new golf house, Pinehurst, with most of our Green Section staff. The Green Section is one of the, I mean, when I came to the USGA, I was aware of the Green Section. You know, when I applied for that job, I knew of the Green Section by way of their course consulting service. So I had encountered some agronomists in the field agronomists that had been working on projects that I was working on. Dave Oss at Sabonic, Pat Gross at a few places in California. And so I knew about that part of it, but I can honestly say that I didn't know much about all the other things that the Green Section does. And I think that that's something that's, you know, a pretty common thread that we encounter throughout the golf industry. And for a department that's 100 years, more than 100 years old, that's disappointing at times. And that's part of why we're, you know, something that we're always working on. I think at the USGA broadly, the USGA does so much that people don't know about. And people know about the US Open, or they know about some of the higher profile things. But there's a lot that the USGA does for the game that kind of flies under the radar a little bit and just happens in the background and benefits the game, and people don't really know about it. I think the Green Section is absolutely one of those things. You know, for, like I said, we were founded in 1920, the Green Section was, with the goal of gathering, generating, creating some information about how to maintain golf courses, right? What were the best ways to maintain golf courses in the United States? So much of the knowledge that we had in the game at that time was based on what had been done in the United Kingdom, what had been done in Ireland, what had been done in Europe. Some of those things applied to, you know, United States course maintenance, but a lot of it didn't. You're talking about very different environments. We have articles in those early issues of the Green Section Record. Green Section Record started publishing. So Green Section was founded in 1920. Green Section Records started getting published in 1921 under a different name, but basically that publication has been continuous, barring a couple of years in the Great Depression, and I think maybe one during World War II, been in continuous publication ever since with different names. And in those early all of that's available online, by the way. In those early issues, you see them talking about, you know, there's an articles about here in Pinehurst where they were talking about potentially just giving up on the idea of having grass on the courses at all, because it was so hopeless that they would just be sand, tee to green, like sand fairways. There was no way to grow the grass. They started off with sand greens, obviously, but they weren't even sure that they could get fairways to work. And so you're dealing in the United States with much more, a wider range of environments than what people were used to in the United Kingdom, more extremes of temperature, just a lot of unanswered questions about course maintenance. And there wasn't really a great way to do an organized and scientific approach to learn about it. And that's where the USGA kind of stepped in, working with the United States Department of Agriculture to sort of, okay, we're going to start researching this. We're going to start learning about turf grass in the United States. We're going to start comparing best practices. So that research program, which is still in existence, you know, and is a foundation of what the Green Section does today, that was sort of the first piece of the puzzle. And that research program today funds, I think we fund, you know, well over $1 million in turf grass and environmental research every year at universities all around the country. Our staff conducts a bunch of research in-house. So we're constantly funding, supporting, and generating new information about that, and have been for, you know, since the Green Section was founded. The other part of that is, you know, research is only useful if you can share that information, right? Like having the information is one thing. You've got to be able to get it out to people. So really, that's what the Green Section Record was initially founded for, and still it remains a primary goal of what we do today, is to take that information from our research program and spread it out throughout the world. Beyond that, and same as it was back in the day, it was about connecting practitioners, right? I mean, back in the 1920s, it was a lot harder for superintendents to connect than it is today. But still, there's a lot of value in just learning from the best practices, the experiences that everybody has in the field, and trying to apply those lessons to your course, whether they apply perfectly or not. There's usually something that you can take away from it. And the more that we can learn from each other, the better sort of, you know, that whole effort kind of comes up together. So that's another part of why the Green Section record exists is to share best practices. We've also got our field agronomists. So we've got a course consulting service. We've got field agronomists based throughout the country, and they're visiting hundreds of golf courses a year. They're getting a chance to see all different courses in all different environments. They're also contributing to and supporting USGA championship agronomy, which is another key aspect of what the Green Section does. We support every USGA championship in one form or another. We've got staff on the ground to help with course conditions, to help, interface between the championship staff and the host course superintendent, all of those different aspects. We learn a lot when we're doing that. Championship agronomy is the place where we get to see, a real pressure test of different kinds of conditions, of different kinds of maintenance practices, different techniques that we've never seen at some of the top most successful places in the country. That provides a lot of great information for the Green Section record, for our social media channels. We take that information that our agronomists see during their travels course consulting, when they're popping in at different places, also at these championships. They contribute and take that information and turn it into articles that we then publish into the Green Section record. So most of our articles, most of our video content, we do videos, we do articles, we do podcasts. The majority of that comes from our USGA field agronomists and from our research staff. My education team also contributes to that. We write a number of articles, we produce videos, on topics to kind of fill the gaps as needed. But really our primary content contributors are our agronomists and our researchers. We take the information that they're learning from research, from field experience, from championships, put that into all kinds of different educational content. The Green Section record is totally free and always has been. It's available to subscribe online. We don't sell your information. We don't do anything. It is just, there's no ads. It is just there as a resource that we provide to the golf industry and to people that are interested in golf. So it's not just for practitioners. Certainly that's the lean of it, is providing information to superintendents, maintenance professionals. But there's a lot in there for golfers, for committees, for golf course owners that, is put in easy to understand ways of like, hey, here's the basics of why we're aerating this spring. Hey, here's the reason why courses in Texas this spring or whatever it might be, you're having winter injury. Like whatever the different challenges are, we try to provide that information in a lot of different formats so that it reaches and is valuable and useful for a lot of different people within the golf world, not just the golf industry. Going back a little bit to when the Green Section was founded and the Green Section record first started being published, the goal in those early days was really to try to educate practitioners, right? Superintendents didn't have the training 100 years ago that they have today, obviously. And so it was a lot of just trying to teach people how to grow grass in a golf context and share some best practices and figure out how to get grass on the fairways at Pinehurst kind of thing. Nowadays, superintendents are so well trained, so well educated, so well informed that yes, absolutely, we're still trying to provide them with some of the most up-to-date information from our research program, some of the most interesting insights from the travels of our agronomists. But we're also spending probably more and more time trying to support them in dealing with their customers, dealing with their bosses, for lack of a better term. I mean, at the end of the day, all of us that have worked in golf course maintenance know that you can know the right things to do, but if you can't get support to do them from ownership, from club committees, from the golfers at your course, whoever it might be, you're not going to be able to do those things. You're not going to have the investment in, we need this equipment. We need to spend more money on a trained golf course mechanic. We need to have this maintenance window during the week that we're able to do the practices that for the conditions that you're asking for. This is the resources that we need, the time that we need in order to get these things done. So providing that sort of support to the superintendent about all these sort of basic agronomy questions that come up in discussions with their bosses, really, and the people at their courses is a really important role for us. And it's an area where we can lend some credibility to what the superintendent's saying. All of us have been in the situation where the right thing, you've said it a million times to whoever it is, and then an outside voice kind of puts it over the top, right? Like sometimes people will listen to an outside voice, even if you were telling them the same thing, for a long time. That's an unfortunate reality that we just kind of all have to live with in the world. And that's a role that, we're able to play as the United States Golf Association. We've got that credibility. We've got 100 years of history. We've got the fact that we're, a nonprofit and that we're focused on really providing the best information possible for these courses to get the best results possible. I mean, that's our interest in the whole thing is just the best playing conditions possible with the resources available. And, how do we get there for each course's individual situation? And so that's a big part of what the Green Section Record provides, is a lot of technical content, but also a lot of golfer focused content. And that comes through the Green Section Record. That comes through our Green Section Twitter account. We're getting ready to start up a LinkedIn account. We also provide a lot of that information through broader USGA channels. So whether that's, at USGA handles that a lot of golfers follow, whether that's, content specific to a championship site that gives us an opportunity to talk about sustainability or an interesting maintenance practice or something that might apply to your course, or just all the work that goes into preparing a championship, right? People see golf on TV on the weekend and then want to go back to their course and be like, well, why isn't it like that? And it can be helpful when we can show a picture of the amount of equipment, the amount of volunteers, the expertise of the volunteers, and kind of talk through that and be like, hey, okay, this isn't routine maintenance, even at this course that has a high budget, has had one for a long time, and has been in great shape, working up towards this one moment in time. How do we kind of get those expectations back down to earth for your regular round and what you really need to play, right? I mean, people see things on TV and think, that would be cool. Might be cool for a day, but playing US Open conditions day after day is probably not what most golfers really need, not what most courses can afford. So we try to provide some of that information as well through the big platform of some of our championships. So it'll come into your email inbox 2 times a month. We do first and third Fridays every month. We got a Green Section Record coming up a couple days here, actually. And in every issue, there will be 4 regional updates that are written by agronomists in those regions. So Northeast, Southeast, Central, and West. And that kind of provides timely, regionally specific information. I mean, that information often applies beyond just the one region, but the goal there really is to provide timely, regionally specific information to those locations, because things change a lot in just a couple of weeks in the golf course maintenance world. You get a bunch of bad weather coming through an area. You get flooding like we've just seen in a bunch of places like Kentucky and Missouri. I mean, these things happen quickly and create challenges, create issues that people need to be aware of, whether that's the practitioners need to see, hey, here are some tips for how to deal with these problems that our agronomists have seen, or hey, here's an article to pass along to your course committee about, what the recovery time is going to look like for something like this. Or you can talk about seasonal aeration practices or any of the kind of things that are going on that our staff see in their travels, in their regions during the year. That's going to be in every issue. Usually we'll have either a informational video or a podcast or both in every issue to try to provide some multimedia content. Our podcast is a great way to kind of get some more in-depth conversations that we can't quite cover in an article, right? Like some of these topics are really hard to cover in text. It's hard to write an article that covers enough ground without, kind of losing your readers, right? Especially with today's attention spans. I feel like I've got like about 1,000 words of reading in me at a moment, at a given time, and then that's about it. So some of these topics are a lot more than 1,000 words to kind of work through. Podcast is a great vehicle for us to do that with. And again, you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, sort of anywhere you get podcasts. And then we'll have sort of a featured article at least once a month. It's a longer article written by one of our agronomists, one of our researchers, that really goes into detail on a specific topic. So I know you're going to be talking to Elliott Dowling later about less aggressive aeration methods. That conversation came from a featured article that he wrote on that topic, where he really got into detail on this sort of one element of golf course maintenance. What are sort of some of the specifics, the best practices, the questions to think through, all those different things. And that's part of it too, is not everything can be answered in every one article, but we want to at least help people come up with a plan to answer it at their specific facility, right? We can't tell every course how to figure out how often to aerify and what tine size to use, but we can help you develop a checklist of like, all right, these are the things to think about. How do I apply this specifically to my situation? So we typically have a featured article. We'll often have a research article that comes directly from our researchers, written by the researchers themselves about findings from various studies. And that can be everything from, winter injury resistant grasses for cool climates to different types of sand, different sand top dressing programs, all different kinds of, really interesting, really detailed research that, again, you can take that information and it may not apply perfectly to your course, but the underlying concepts will get you thinking about, hey, how can this work for me? Hey, can I do some test plots of this kind of stuff and try out these different grasses or a few different options and see what works on my site? All these different kind of things that you can kind of learn from and then bring back to your facility itself. And then we do have, again, I'd say on a pretty regular basis, an article that we would kind of put in the category of for the golfer. That's just 500 words, really short, quick little bite of information about a key topic. I mean, we've got an article coming up about why water conservation matters regardless of where your course is, right? Water conservation is something that people can sometimes think is a Western problem or a problem for courses in the Southwest, but realistically, there's a lot of good reasons why courses everywhere should think about trying to use less water. So we've got a For the Golfer coming up about that in the next issue. We've got Earth Day coming up, so we've got an article highlighting one of the chapters in our water conservation playbook. We just did a video last issue about naturalized areas and kind of how to get the most benefits and what some of the challenges are that come with naturalized areas. So those are a few examples of kind of the general type of content that you might find. But we cover a lot of ground. I mean, we cover a lot every year, and every year I look back on it and I'm surprised. We have a content plan to kind of start the year, but really that's just the foundation of it. And then so much comes up every year in the golf course maintenance world that we didn't expect, that the content kind of goes in the directions that it wants to go in. And a great example of that was 2020. We had a content plan to start that year that didn't include a COVID pandemic. That went from, we created a bunch of articles and videos early in that year about why courses needed to keep their maintenance staff on and why you couldn't just shut the whole thing down and expect to find it in good condition a month later. We went from that to, how do you manage so much traffic on your course now that the amount of play has like doubled? And then that's something that has kind of continued to be a topic of conversation, whether it's in regional updates, whether it's in featured articles or For the Golfers, of just, we're in sort of a golf boom right now that I never really saw in my career, honestly. I mean, I was fortunate to be very busy in golf course design and construction, but I was lucky to be getting on the handful of projects that were happening in a given year, right? And now there's so much renovation and construction work and the amount of play. I think the NGF said we just set a new record for number of rounds played in the United States last year. So that COVID bubble, if you want to call it that, really isn't a bubble. That's something that our CEO, Mike Wan, talks about all the time. Like, hey, let's stop waiting for the bubble to pop here. Like it's been quite a few years at this point, and it seems like the interest is just kind of growing. And so it's a little bit more of a new normal in a lot of ways. And so that's something that we're having to educate about all the time too. And we just did, our Northeast agronomist, Brian Getka, just wrote an article in the last record about getting back to the basics of sort of course care etiquette, for lack of a better term, because courses are just handling a lot of play everywhere. No matter what kind of course you are, you're just seeing a lot of play, a lot of ball marks, a lot of divots. What are some things that golfers can do to just like, hey, yeah, there's a lot of play going on. Let's make sure we're really trying to do our part here to park the carts in the right place and not run over the cart signs and not drive through the wet spot and not do all the things that sometimes golfers will do. And let's do our part here, because everybody's struggling to keep up with the amount of play, and we want to keep courses in the best shape possible for all the play that's happening. And it's not easy. Strongly encourage everybody to subscribe to the Green Section Record. It is literally free. We put a lot of work into it. It's really good information, and there's going to be something for everybody in just about every issue. So strongly recommend subscribing.
It's a home game for you, huh?
This is great. Yeah, finally.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how many days are you on the road?
A lot. It's been slow to start. It's well, I say that I've lived up here long enough now. I should be used to it, but just a short season in New England that like everybody's wanting to get going, but we're still sitting here. It snowed Monday. I was heading to the airport Monday and snowed and sleeted. So it's hurry up and wait.
Yeah, we had sleet at my son's lacrosse game last night. That wasn't a whole lot of fun, but 'tis the season.
It's been cold everywhere.
Yeah, it's been nuts.
Elliot, good to meet
Adam,
you.
hi.
Big
good to meet
Wings
you.
fan.
Yeah, they screwed it. Got my thinking stick here too, but they're
There
gone.
you go. Nice.
Your thinking stick, or is that to keep people in line stick?
Well, it's interesting you say that. There have been enough people on our staff teams meetings that have figured out that when this comes out, that means it's time to keep it going. But
I love that.
That's great. All right, well, we'll get into it, Elliot. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your way to the green section.
so Elliott Dowling, this is my going on 14th year, which is probably as long as I've held any job. My wife jokingly like asks when the other shoe's gonna fall, but I found my way to the green section. I was an assistant superintendent and a superintendent in Chicago, and I used the green section. And I remember asking both my agronomists. I had Ty McClellan and Bob Vavrick in my time in Chicago. I loved the interaction with them, and honestly, I mean, of course, I loved their help with my golf course, and believe me, I needed plenty of it. But I loved hearing their stories. I mean, if you've been around the green section and people who have been in the green section long enough, which is crazy to think that I'm kind of one of the old timers now, believe it or not. But the stories, the places that they've been, the things they've seen, I liked that as much as I liked the help. So I asked them every time they came, like, how do you get this job? And the answer was generally, you don't. You get lucky somehow because there aren't many of us still, and there weren't many of us then. And it was a job that when you got, you tend to hold on to. It's a good job, and people enjoy it. You get into it knowing what you're getting yourself into, and so there isn't a lot of movement. And then really, I guess what piqued my interest, or maybe perhaps sold the deal, I was volunteering for a friend of mine, Pete Bachman, at Pebble Beach for the what was that, '08 or '09 US Open, I forgot. And Pete is now the superintendent there, has been for I guess a year or so. So it has come full circle with him. But anyway, he was an assistant at the time for the Open. I volunteered to help him, and he called me when I was going out and said, "Hey, I've got the best volunteer job for you. This is the honey job. Your only responsibility is to follow Mike Davis at the time, the setup crew, and just do whatever they see, clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up." And so for a week, I walked the course with Mike and the setup team, and they didn't know me. I didn't know them. And I really stayed out of their hair. I didn't ask too many questions, but listening to them, I was eavesdropping into all of their conversations, listening to them go through championship setup, US Open setup, and how they were thinking through shots and approach shots and hole locations. And to me, it was just the coolest thing. I mean, I could not have imagined a cooler thing. So that to me was, man, if I'm going to work in golf, I was a superintendent. I had accomplished what I set out to do in school. I was a superintendent. But I thought, if I'm going to work in golf, why not work for the governing body? Like, to me, that seemed like the top of the echelon. And so that's what I did. I just pestered, at the time, Darren enough, Bavard, who hired me, and is still my closest mentor and ally in the green section. I pestered him a lot to get me a job. He didn't know me. I just kept cold emailing him, and finally they relented and gave me a job, and here we are. So 14 years later, or whatever it is.
Darren got sick of hearing from you, so he's just like, let's just hire the guy.
Just give him a job.
No joke. I think he would tell you that. He's like, man, I can just get this guy off my back if we hire him. And
That's
I don't
one
know
way
that
to
it
do
worked
it.
out for him. It worked out for me. I'm still on his back, but
That's great.
Awesome.
So talk a little bit about what you do as an agronomist with the USGA Green Section.
so the basic function of what we do as agronomists is course consulting. That's, every year we try to do a breakdown on what our job is and all the different functions. And every year it comes out to around 70% is course consulting. So that's, every day in the summer, I'm going to a new golf course and trying to help them with whatever, I'm going to say, problems they have. Sometimes it's not a problem. I mean, a lot of my work is repeat, check-ins. It's someone scheduling a visit for, pick a date, July 24th, forgetting, not knowing what the season's going to bring, if they're going to have any challenges. They just want that general sort of check-in. And my feeling is a lot of them, through a number of years working with them, have become friends, and I think they like hearing my stories as much as I liked hearing the stories 14 years ago or 20 years ago when I started. I think a lot of it's that, just a kind of a connection to the USGA, and then it starts to break off there from um, educational requirements. So we write for the Green Section Record. We do the regional updates. We do a feature article. We do a For the Golfer video. The championship component. Most agronomists work 2 championships, some 3, some 1. Just depends on the year and your schedule and where they are. And then we're doing a better job. We're starting to come back to some things that when I first started, we did a really good job of. Little workshops, public golf workshops, not major market type workshops or specialty workshops. We used to do a great job with those. We kind of fell off of them for a little while, and we're coming back. I think, me again as one of the kind of the old timers now. I remember doing those, and I remember them being impactful for people who really had no connection to us. They didn't take a regular visit, and so this was our way to sort of get back. And I think again, as the governing body, as the USGA, I think we do owe that to the industry in part. We can't do it all the time, but I do think we owe it to do these little workshops for people who don't have a real connection to us. So I'm happy we're getting back to that.
Busy. You guys got a lot going on with that job. It's really cool to hear about. So one of the biggest reasons we brought you on today, Elliott, is to talk about one of the most recent articles that you wrote and kind of bring that to life. So we'd love for you to kind of take some time, tell us about the article, and sort of get into it for us.
So I give a presentation every year at GIS or GCSAA on this 2-hour presentation. And a couple of years ago, I called it a trend or an emerging thought. And now it's really becoming just a really good option for people. It's not really an emerging trend, but it's every year I would go to a golf course in the spring, in the fall, and whether it's a hard time getting labor back in the spring, different shifting weather in the spring, or any number of examples, superintendents were finding that it was really challenging to do their normal aeration in the spring, or it wasn't recovering because of weather. And it brought to light really some old research that's becoming new again, and there's new research on it. And just this thought of, if I can't accomplish what I want to do in the spring with aeration, what else can I do? Because I do have a goal with putting green management. I want to achieve that goal, but are there other options? And as I say in my presentation, the way I was brought up, and any one of the textbooks behind me all say, spring and fall aeration, half-inch tine, give or take, trying to disrupt 15 to 20%. And that was just what we knew and what we did. You got into that rhythm, and that's what you did. Just kind of on rinse and repeat zombie mode. That's just what you did. And now with new research and a lot of good tools and just new understanding, that's the way the golf industry works, from the superintendent side, we're getting to a point where a lot of superintendents are realizing that the aeration program that we all used to do, the traditional spring and fall, wasn't really achieving the goals we set out to do. We weren't moving the needle with thatch management. It was becoming really time consuming, and golfers like to complain about recovery time, and the holes would stay open. So we're in a position now where I'm seeing superintendents do less, or at least smaller spring aeration in particular, when the weather is just crummy. Like I said, it snowed and sleeted on Monday. If you'd aerated Monday and the weather we're having in New England, it's going to sit for a long time. And they're doing smaller times more often during the year. Or a really interesting trend that I like is solid tine aeration and top dressing. I think one thing that we've learned, and this research has brought out, is when you pull a core, if you're pulling a core trying to reduce thatch, you pull a core, you fill it with sand, the whole, you're creating a really good environment for growth. You're probably, when I ask people in my GCSAA presentation, who stops spraying growth regulators around aeration time and who bumps fertilizer around aeration time, trying to get quick recovery, a lot of hands come up. 80 to 90% of the hands come up. So when you think about, you've created a great environment for regrowth, a space for grass to spread out, and you're feeding it more. You're removing a core trying to remove thatch, but you're producing at least an equal amount of thatch. Some good research is showing more thatch on the back end with accelerating recovery. So as superintendents start to think about this, they're saying, well, if I'm aerating to reduce thatch, but I'm knowingly producing thatch for recovery, perhaps even more, then what's the point? Like, why are we doing this method? And that's where, I cite the Rutgers research all the time with top dressing. Is really great stuff. McCoy's work at Ohio State I use. I know Rock Hassan in Nebraska has done some work, but showing, and Michael Woods really was big into this too. I reference his stuff a lot with aeration and recovery on we're producing thatch by eliminating thatch. We think we're doing the right thing, but you're not making any headway. So that's where this became, it went from like an interesting thought. Guys were pretty nervous about it because I'm going to say it's a radical idea. We just know that you aerate, you pull a core twice a year, at least. So to not pull a core and do solid tine aeration and top dressing, or pull a small tine throughout the year, was a pretty big change, and especially putting greens. And I get it. Superintendents are pretty guarded with putting greens. That's your moneymaker. But it got to the point where there were enough superintendents doing it and liking it. I'd seen a lot of it, anecdotally, that it was time to do an article about it and bring it to light, coast to coast, and then also do the presentation, which, according to, I guess, the last survey results from this most recent show in San Diego, the seminar that Zach and I do had the biggest waiting list of any presentation. I mean, anytime you attach aeration and aeration trends to anything, that name alone sparks some interest in superintendents. They're interested in what you have to say. They may not like it. They may not agree with it. That's fine. It's great when there's some people in the room who don't completely agree with what we're saying, because that brings out some great conversation. You can talk through and generally kind of end in some middle ground, or they just say, I don't agree, but I appreciate your side. And we kind of do that dance, and that's fine too.
Definitely a hot topic. So you touched upon it a little bit, but I'd just be kind of curious on some of the key factors that don't allow those that are doing that aeration in the spring, that don't allow them to reach their goals for that practice.
What are the factors that are not allowing them to reach their goals?
Yeah, what are the factors holding them back from achieving their goals with doing that practice in the spring?
Well, it's weather dependent, right? I mean, everything we talk about is with the weather. So what'll happen is the superintendent will have a plan for aeration, and then the weather won't cooperate. So they'll, pull back or make an adjustment. And that was happening quite a bit in the last several years with, this shift in spring weather. It seems like spring is cooler and crappier than, quote unquote normal, what we kind of remember. But fall is tremendous. You get into September, October, even November seems like a continuation of summer. So as they were sort of bailing or adjusting their spring aeration, they were doing what I talk about in my article or this presentation without recognizing that they were doing it. They were making adjustments, but then picking that up on the back end somewhere else, whether it was a little bit more in the summer or a little bit more in late fall, early winter. So without recognizing it, they were doing what I talk about. This was just kind of bringing to light that, hey, what you're doing makes sense. You may not realize it, but you don't need to just change because the weather didn't cooperate. What you can do, you can do this as part of your program and just plan on it. And one thing I love, and I love to remind superintendents, we all talk about, what golf traffic and golf carts and ball marks and, just golfers, what they do to a golf course. But without golfers, most of us don't have a job. We need these golfers, right? We need cart revenue. We need daily fee revenue. We need golfers on a golf course. So I take the angle, if I can do a smaller time in the spring or more often during the year, and certainly if you're in a position where you can do solid tine aeration and top dressing, not only is it easier for you and your staff, but golfers really don't notice these practices as much as they do the larger tine aeration. I mean, just think of golfer mentality. When they have a putting green, all of a sudden you put a hole in the green, their thinking is, well, the greens aren't as good as they were. They're not going to putt well. They're going to be slow and bumpy. Just that's their opinion already. So if you can modify what you're doing and do smaller but more often, or make some really good adjustments to top dressing and solid tine, and you still achieve your annual goal and your surface management goal and your organic matter goal, and golfers don't notice, they're not knocking on your door asking about recovery or why do we always aerate when the greens are perfect, or I just came back from Florida and I got to start the year off with bumpy aerated greens. That to me is a win-win. I mean, we can't lose sight of the fact that keeping golfers happy and bringing them back and keeping their mentality of the course as high as possible is always a goal, in everything we do. And this is one example of several, right? Where we can't lose sight of the fact that we do have to take some golfer opinion and golfer feeling into what we're doing, because golf's booming. I mean, just the time alone to get on the course to aerate is really challenging. So you may have the staff and the budget and the equipment to do what you want to do, but do you even have the time to do that? Time is forcing the hand too on making adjustments. But never lose sight of the fact that, golfers will say anything they want. And sometimes, you just say thank you and you move on, and it's probably, not a great idea. But sometimes you need to listen to that and say, maybe they're right. Maybe there is something to what they're saying. Maybe the way they're communicating it isn't exactly accurate, but there's something there that I should pay attention to. And golf's booming. We need to capitalize on that. And so I just, because of the tools and research and new ideas, we have the ability to continue to capitalize on a booming industry and do things a little bit differently, but achieve what we ultimately want to achieve. That would be the point.
That's awesome. I love all of that. And something I've been really excited to ask you about today, Elliott, is the GS3 ball and how it kind of works in your job. And then, pertaining to your article, any information about how long disruption lasts from various approaches?
Yeah, so the GS3 ball is a great tool now to marry up with what I'm talking about. And superintendents, when the GS3 ball first came out, this was aeration alone was kind of the one major selling point I thought of, more than speed or even firmness. It was selling to your membership or your owners or your even just daily play, not only the importance of aeration, but what different practices take for recovery, and then how you adjust on that. So the GS3 would be a perfect tool to, take your baseline measurement the day before aeration, or, shortly before aeration, as your baseline, like, hey, the greens are good. We haven't done anything to them aeration wise. These are our numbers. And then you aerate top dress, and you track your metrics with the ball through the process, and find that date where you get back to where you started. My guess is, from what I've seen with a lot of our data, or at least the data I've been taking, is it's not as long as golfers think. Again, you got to think about golfer perspective. When they see a hole in the green, they just assume the greens aren't good. Even when greens are recovering from aeration, that's their perception. Now, when you can roll this ball and say, hey, you may see some open holes that are still recovering, but they're full with sand, and there's some grass laying over. And our metrics now show that we're basically where we were when we started 8 days ago. We don't need to discount rounds for 14 days, or we don't need to shy away from playing the course for the couple weeks around aeration. You can come back quicker than you want. We can return play, especially from a daily fee, municipal, resort type operation. We can return play sooner and not worry about, reducing the price of rounds if you do that. Based on these metrics, we can sell that. We can sell to our membership that, hey, if you let me aerate more often during the season and top dress more often during the season, we don't have the big disruption in the spring and fall. And again, according to our metrics, we take a little bit of a dip the day we do it, but a day or two later, we're right back to where it was. Even if you see a little bit of sand or see a little, a couple holes still, the data shows that we're back. So there's no reason to fear this, and there's no reason to not do this. That's how I would use the ball for any number of reasons. But with aeration, to me, is just a home run, because it helps sell a program, or sell why you do it, or sell that you don't need to make longer term changes to your fee structure or your play structure because of aeration. But just the GS3 ball in general. Another thing I've been a proponent of is just the communication tool. I often say, especially, in golf, there are a lot of really smart, powerful people who play golf in any industry. There's so many people who play golf, ranging from anywhere in the gambit. A lot of them work with spreadsheets and figures and data. So think about how we communicated as superintendents 5 years ago. Even it was sort of, this is what I'm telling you, and I need you to believe me, right? The weather has changed, the humidity is up, we just aerated, we just sprayed, whatever it may be. I'm telling you this, I'm asking you to believe me. Now you can take the GS3 ball and tell them the exact same thing, roll the ball, and give them the data, give them the spreadsheet, the pie graph. You can overlay weather and humidity with aeration, with a spray, with a double cut and roll, whatever it is, whatever the variable is. You're telling them the exact same thing you told them 5 years ago, but you're putting it into a form that they work with every day. They understand metrics and spreadsheets and pie charts. That is something that resonates with a lot of golfers, more so than just the weather's bad today. I can show you how the weather impacts the golf course every day. That to me is the selling point alone. I mean, it's more of a communication tool than even just the superintendent using it for them every day. It's something that, of course, superintendents would benefit from using every day or several times a week. But if you want to communicate to golfers on the importance of certain things, or how certain weather or maintenance practices affect how the course plays, this is a great way to do it. And then I like the printouts. I like the readability of it from a golfer's perspective. That resonates with them more than just, hey, take my word for it.
It's a game changer. There's absolutely no question about that. It's definitely bringing data to life. So kind of going back to some of the practices, and you touched upon a few things to help, organic matter management. What are some of your recommendations, or what are some of your favorite practices, and then also frequencies that superintendents should be thinking about during the season to keep that that OM down.
Yeah, the one thing that still is the best way to manage organic matter, either where it is or if you need to make some adjustments, is top dressing. And so where superintendents can get a little bit sideways on this is, and again, I'll go back to the Rutgers research, which is just phenomenal work. If a superintendent is using the same sand for regular top dressing, so regular being that monthly light application or bi-weekly, something like that, if it's the same sand that they use for aeration, it's probably the wrong sand for that use. So the sand you use for aeration is a larger particle, a coarser particle, because you want to maintain that pore space. You want to keep channels, keep the pores open in the channels for good, gas exchange and rooting and things that we all know. But what happens with top dressing is if you use that same sand, those coarse particles are the particles that are almost impossible to work into the grass. You overwork it to get it in, or they're the particles that you pick up with greens mowers. So your mechanic's not happy, your quality of cut's not great. Perhaps the performance metrics, surface metrics aren't great because you just get kind of that shearing more than a good cut. So you really need a two sand system. You need your aeration sand, your coarser sand, and then a finer sand, this light dusting. And when I go to a golf course and explain this to not only a superintendent, but to golfers who were there on the visit, it should be put out at such a light rate, like a literal dust, that a golfer would look at the practice and wonder, why are we even doing it? Like, what did you do? It should be so light that you can't see it. You don't need any sort of dragging, mechanical incorporation. Some people will turn an irrigation head just to knock it down. Some won't do anything. They'll put it out on a closed day or a closed morning, and by the next day, the grass has already grown through it and it's gone. But it doesn't have those big coarse particles. It has finer particles that are easier to get into the canopy and sit right on top, and that'll dilute that mat layer right at the surface. And then as you aerate, poke holes, aerate spring or fall, you'll go back to your coarse sand, and that's how you maintain that open column. And it doesn't, superintendents, their fear a lot is, if I put out this finer sand, it's gonna seal the surface. It's gonna bridge that off. And that's true if that's all you use. But if you poke holes and use your coarser sand, that'll maintain an open profile through that. And as long as you can break that surface tension, you're gonna be okay. But that's the sticking point. Is superintendents all the time I hear, well, I don't top dress June, July, August, September because of what the sand could do to the green. It's not what it even does to the mowers at times or what it does to the playability. It's too harsh. It's too coarse. I don't want it on the green. And already when they tell me that, I'm thinking, well, that's not the right sand. We need to look at your sand and do something different. So that would be the number one. But I really like these micro tines. There's Ninja Tine, Samurai Tine. There might be another one I'm forgetting, but these micro tines, you get the benefit of the hole itself is not much bigger than a needle tine, which golfers are used to. They've seen the needle tine. That doesn't affect them. That doesn't change how they feel about the greens, really. They see those little pencil tines. Similar size hole, but you are removing a little bit of a plug. You are taking something out. That's going to help. If you do that once per month during the growing season, you can probably remove as much organic matter as you would have in that half-inch tine spring or fall. You're going to get that same, 4 to 8 or 5 to 8%, depending on how what your growing season is and how often you do it, which would replace that spring aeration that really gets a lot of conversation from golfers. So that's what I talk about not only in the article, but in my presentation is, if I can do something smaller more often during the season that golfers don't notice and replace something that they do notice, if I had the ability to do that, that is something that to me would be worth investigating. And then solid tine, I love. I see it more in either a sand-based putting green, a USGA green, or those older greens that have been top dressed for 100 years and they have 6 or so inches of really good sand over soil. You're a good candidate for a solid tine program because you don't have a lot of thatch and organic matter in the column to remove. You're not trying to adjust your soil profile. You've done that already, or the past, 4 or 5 superintendents have all helped you in that goal of really good top dressing and aeration. You can now transition to a solid tine program with top dressing, fracture the soil, get the sand to dilute, break through some zones of compaction if they're in there. But that's a great program if you have that ability. Not everyone does. Some people genuinely need to change their soil in the putting greens. That's different. You need to create a bigger hole and get sand in there to change. But if that work's been done for you, or you've been at it for several years and have gotten to that point, you're in a good position to consider changing.
A lot of good ideas there. A lot of great advice. I am definitely trying that 2-sand aeration this year. That sounds very, very interesting.
I just wanted to go back to that. You mentioned the 2-sand method. Is there research that you've seen or that you've done that shows the viability of that? Because that was the first thing. As soon as you said that, probably the same thing you hear from superintendents is, well, how is that finer sand going to interact with the more coarse sand? I think common sense would probably tell you maybe that the finer sand's going to maybe get locked up and, kind of fill some of those gaps of the coarser sand. Talk about, some of the data behind the viability of that 2-sand system.
Yeah, so that's something that Murphy et al. At Rutgers really hashed out and continue to work on, and Rocket, Nebraska did a lot of work on it too, and showing that if you only use that finer sand, and I guess I should clarify, and if you read any of this research, you'll see that it's not fine sand. Don't go with a fine sand. It's a finer sand. It's really a sand that you would go to your supplier and say, here's my aeration sand. I want this. Take out the coarse particles. If you can get out those coarse particles and keep the fine medium to medium fine sands, that's what we're talking about. It is not a fine sand. It's going to have some medium particles, and probably some you'll pick up with a greens mower, but not as many as a coarse sand. But in their research, they showed that if you only used that and didn't aerate or didn't use a coarser sand to open that column in there, then you will seal the surface. Could be a couple years, could be many years, could be less than, depending on how often you do it. That's more of a time dependent. So that gets back to the importance of, you do need to maintain some aeration. You need to break that tension at the surface. And anytime you aerate with a bigger tine, either pull a core or use a solid tine, something big enough to work sand into. So, 1/2-inch tine, 3/8 inch, probably minimum. That's where you're going to want your coarser sand to keep those columns open. So yes, it's a legitimate concern. And if it's sort of misused or misunderstood, you could run into issues. But if you maintain a true 2-sand system, you're going to be fine.
So I shouldn't go to Lowe's and get some play sand and some fine play sand and throw that out.
You shouldn't probably. No, but I would tell. So again, these are things that superintendents, they hear what I'm saying and they often like what I'm saying, but it's a nerve-wracking thing. I get it. And again, it's putting greens. If this were fairways, tees, even rough, like that, okay, I'm willing to try. But putting greens are putting greens. I get it. You can test compatibility of your sands. You can test this on a practice green. I will, what I tell any superintendent who we have this conversation on any one of these aeration practices, it's a 2-sand system, it's a solid tine and top dress system, is to try it. A lot of superintendents I work with, they've done the right thing for years. The putting greens are in really great shape. I'm confident that if you pick solid tine, aerate, and top dress, if you try this program for a year, your putting greens aren't just going to magically collapse overnight because you didn't pull a core. You've done the right thing for so many years. You got a good soil profile. You've got a good fertilizer and pesticide program, and everything's good. You're just going to adjust how you manage either the surface or below the surface, try it. Try it for a year. Try it for 2 years. And often what I find is when superintendents try it on a practice green, or they'll go try it on 9 holes compared to 9, or whatever makes them feel comfortable, they often stick with it, or at least stick with the thought of it, and then make their own adjustments, which is fine. But they often realize that this is better. I'm accomplishing my goal of maintaining the organic where I want it. It's easier on my staff. It's easier on the golfers. It's just an overall better method. They prove it to themselves. And on putting greens, superintendents they need to prove it to themselves. They'll read research. They'll listen to me or another agronomist, USGA agronomist, and they'll hear what we're saying and they like what we're saying. But until they prove it to themselves, they're not fully bought in. And that's fine. That's something you just need to do. But do it. I mean, oftentimes it's odd to me having these conversations. A lot of times I can sense that it's this superintendent's almost seeking like permission or affirmation that, hey, this isn't a crazy thought. Like it's okay to try this. I'm going to be fine. And if you don't like it after a year, again, I'm confident your greens, they may fail for any number of reasons in the summer. Summers are hard. It won't be because you didn't pull a core in the spring. You tried something different. It's just, I'm confident in that. You can try this for yourself and prove it to yourself and be confident that it's either going to work and you're going to stick with it, or you're not going to like it and you're going to go back to what you were doing in the fall or next year. It's fine.
What championships are you at this year? Where am I going to see you?
You're going to see Oakmont. Can't wait. Love the U.S. Open at Oakmont. I mean, it's just, to me, the U.S. Open Oakmont's about as good as it gets. I mean, it's just an Oakmont U.S. Open golf course. It's unbelievable. Can't wait. And then I'm going to be at the Boys Junior in Dallas, Trinity Forest, just down there. Was it last week for, pre-site visit, and course is great. Porcalo, they're both in great shape. Came through winter great. It's going to be fun. It's going to be July in Dallas, so guy coming from New England, and it's going to be an adjustment probably, but plenty of water and midday showers will be fine.
Wear an undershirt. If I have any advice for you, it's wear an undershirt.
I need when I go to like amusement park, those people have the fans that they put around their neck. I'm going to need one of those. Whatever those are.
Yes, for sure. It's hot down there. So awesome. Well, we'll let you go, Elliott, and look forward to seeing you. I'll be at Oakmont for sure the whole week. So look forward to seeing you there.
Great. Okay.
Awesome.
See you there.
On behalf of all the professionals around the world that are battling all the elements and all the other obstacles in front of them to provide great conditions. So again, just really appreciate how you all at the USGA are leveling up this industry.